Let the audiences join. So handing over the charge to Mr. Abhimanyu Saxena. The stage is all yours, sir.
So to begin with, let me introduce myself. And given this, this track is focused on entrepreneurship and innovation, so I feel more at home here because I have been first-time entrepreneur, graduated, worked for a few years, then started the startup. So I started my career as an engineer. Okay, is it better now? Fantastic. So yes, going back. To begin with, to introduce me, like probably about 10-15 years back, I was in a university campus, just like many of you, sitting in a hall similar to this one and getting bored by the speaker who was talking about some stuff. And then, of course, I stepped out of the university, as many were talking about. It's a big shock. You are going through classes, figuring out, doing all night memorization to pass the exams, and then you hit the industry and you realize that you have no idea that what to do here, right? But you figure it out. The important thing is that you figure it out. And then around 2014 is when I quit the job to build a startup, which is today India's largest tech education company, Scaler. Students here, how many of you have heard about Scaler before? So it's a tech education company. Like what we felt and that many people talked about earlier as well, that what an important problem to solve is employability, right? And a lot of people might have gotten a degree, but for some reason they do not end up at a place where they can hit the ground running. So we thought that that's a problem that we can solve. Fast forward, today we train close to 20,000 people in a year through our different programs with very high employability rate, because that is what we believe is the key metric for an education ecosystem. The agenda for today's session was Industry 4.0, right? So maybe I'll deep dive into that. And of course, given it's a small, a small setup, feel free to ask any questions in between as well, right? How many of you have heard about Industry 4.0 before? Raise your hands if you have heard about Industry 4.0. Some have heard, some probably have not heard. And before we jump into what is Industry 4.0, it's important that to build the context, right? Even those who have heard about Industry 4.0, what is Industry 1.0? What is 2.0? What is 3.0? How are we directly talking about 4.0? So let me start with a little bit of historical context. Right? As someone was talking just very recently, I think our host was talking very recently, that as much our forefathers and many of us keep cribbing about the fact that see how technology is making the life worst, and but if we get very objective, technology has actually, as a matter of fact, every single decade, every single century, has transformed the quality of human race. And I'll put some very hard numbers at it. Very non-debatable quality of life for human race. Child mortality rate. If 100 kids get born, how many of them die within 1 year? It's a hard metric. If that is reducing, humanity is doing better, no doubt about it, right? What is the average lifespan of human, right? On an average, do human live for 50 years or 70 years or 90 years? That's a hard metric. No one can doubt that how larger lifespan is better for humanity. Both of these two metrics, which no one can debate whether they are good, metrics to get better or not, massively got improved with each wave of technology over last 300-400 years, right? Now let me put that into perspective. About 300 years back, that is when the Industry 1.0 started. around 350 years back when the industrial revolution didn't happen, every single thing had to be done with the muscles. If you want to pull water from a well, you have to either pull it yourself or you have to have few horses or oxes, draw it. If you need to travel somewhere, you will do that in a ox cart. If you are rich, maybe you will go in a horse carriage. When the industry 1.0 happened, that was steam engine. That changed that. Now some physical work could happen without a muscle power powering it, right? You don't need animals, you don't need humans pulling it, machine can do that. What did that lead to? And there are some outcomes which were very unpredictable. That, for example, if I tell you that creation of a steam engine led to everyone across the world getting sufficient clothing and sufficient shelter. Directly it's not connected, right? But just simple steam engine led to creation of a lot of factories. That led to, 100 times more production of textile. That led to everyone getting enough clothing for themselves. Because before that, a lot of people didn't even have enough clothes to wear. As a matter of fact, if you just look back at photographs or paintings of 300 years back, you will see people wearing much less clothes. And that was not about culture. That was just a scarcity. We didn't have enough cloth in the world. Creation of factories created abundance of cloth. Now today all of us wear 3-4 layers of clothes comfortably and we have all the fashion, right? Now coming to Industry 2.0. What was Industry 2.0? That was actually creation of electricity. While 1.0 led to, a steam engine can power few things, but the power could not be transferred from one place to other, right? And that still kept industry relatively limited. Creation of electricity, in a way, made number of factories to be 100 times, right? And then if you look back at what did that lead to? That led to massive abundance across the world. Coming to Industry 3.0, again, very unrelated consequences that it led to, creation of internet, right? Now one might argue that how would creation of internet lead to abundance? Because we keep saying internet is bad, we all spend a lot of time on our phones and screens, right? It's easy to look at that. But if you see, internet led to an explosion in ease of commerce. Today, the total volume of trade that happens in the world almost became 100 times if we look back at past 40 years since internet was created. And actually, as a matter of fact, internet played a huge role in it. Education, right? Earlier, only way to learn was that if you are at MIT, only then you can learn technology, because people who can teach you technology are only at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Internet said that all these articles are online. Scaler today teaches 20,000 people online, right? Now, coming to Industry 4.0, what is Industry 4.0 then? Everything seems to be done already, right? Industry 4.0 is a term which is still evolving. To be candid, there's no definition, there's no very precise definition of Industry 4.0 yet. It's evolving. It's changing every 6 months. What Industry 4.0 we thought will be 4 years back versus what we know today already has changed a lot, right? Roughly Industry 4.0 on a very high level means factories, imagine a car factory where there is no human working, absolutely zero humans. Even today we use a lot of robots, assembly lines, etc. in the manufacturing, right? But it is about, still the humans are there to operate it. Industry 4.0 primarily talks about humans not having to do anything that they should not be doing. In a car factory, for example, if you talk about, let's say, a Tata car factory, right? What do humans do there? There's an assembly line. The parts are already sourced, put on the assembly line. Good 80-90% if we talk about, for example, Tesla assembly, right? 90% of Tesla is assembled by the robots already. Even on the assembly line, you have robots who can, who have the cameras, they can see what's happening. But still there are humans in Tesla factory. Why? The reason is that so far, until probably just a year back, machines were not, forget about being good at it, machines were just incapable of reasoning, right? A computer can say that, all right, this is the formula, this is the answer. But machine cannot reason. If something is not happening as it is expected in a factory, the machine will keep doing what it was doing. It cannot reason, it cannot change anything, right? So in the industry 3.0, we had humans to correct things, right? Now, if we want to imagine a world where there is a factory which produces, say, few thousand cars every single day, and in that whole huge factory, and try to imagine that, in that factory there is no human. What is needed for that? And then we'll also talk about what can it lead to, so that we can think about that how do we as individuals get better prepared for that world. Because whether you like it or not, that world is coming. Just like internet. Whether you like it or not, internet is going to be there. So the smart thing to do is that figure out that what should we do, what skills we should build to be prepared to thrive in that world as well, right? Now often we think, one is that machines are now intelligent. I can click a photo of this room right now and ask ChatGPT that what is happening in this room, how this room could look better. And it will come up with suggestions. I can do that demo right away. I'm sure many of you would have tried that. Machines today are capable enough of doing that. So it is writing on the wall that if machine can do this, just a photo of this room and tell me what could be done better here, what seat arrangement would work better for this hall. If machine can do that, it can very well, if on assembly line, if a screw is not fitting properly, it can also decide what should be done there. And that's what humans do at the assembly line today, right? Would that mean that if the entire industry, the entire production is happening without any interventions from the humans, the natural first thought, what is the thought that comes to your mind? What is the first thought that comes to your mind when you hear that? What would humans do? Is there any employment left? Will we all become unemployed, right? Recently, I can talk about, and this applies not just for the production, for example, not just for manufacturing. The same applies to every single field, right? Recently, for example, again, this is a message that I got just last night, as a matter of fact, from a person who studies at Scaler. Recently, we built a teaching assistant, which is AI, right? You are studying something, you are solving problems, and something is not clear to you. You want to get your doubts resolved. Historically, it's always a teacher who does that. So we built an AI. A teacher does a much better job so far because the teacher knows the pedagogical elements. The teacher will not give the answer. They will give them hints. They will nudge them in the right direction. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? That is why teachers were important. Today, AI does that as well, right? And this student messaged me that, sir, I have been using this AI teaching assistant for few months, and it is so much better than all the teaching assistants you have. Because the human teaching assistants, they explain 3 times, and if the person is not able to understand, they get frustrated and they give him the answer. This is the answer, solve it. The AI teaching assistant does not do that. The AI teaching assistant never gets frustrated, right? So the first thought comes to the mind is then, if this is happening, what would we do? Right? Would we all be unemployed? And the answer is that actually it's radically opposite. Again, if I go back to the history, because studying history is very interesting because it shows you a lot of patterns, right? And as there is a quote that, and this is actually a computer science concept as well, that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. There's a concept in computer science called dynamic programming, which just implements that in the computer algorithms. So if you look back at history, when the steam engine came around, a group of laborers got very agitated. That right now I pull the carts, I pull the ropes, I dig. Now the steam engine is doing all of that. So we are all definitely going to lose our jobs. So they even broke some of the early steam engines that were brought into the factories, right? But if you look at the 5-decade horizon since then, actually the employability in the factories became 1,000 times, right? But what people working in the factory were doing changed massively. Instead of digging and pulling earlier, now the people were operating machines, right? And that is exactly what's happening with the Industry 4.0 as well. The employment is probably going to become 100 times. The amount of things that needs to be done will become 100 times. However, what we will need to do in the Industry 4.0 is very different from what we need to do today. And understanding that and building capabilities for that is what becomes very important, because there will be an interim period maybe of a decade or so where people who are well prepared to be high performers in that world of AI and Industry 4.0, like again, look back at the history, that in 1920s, people in India who said, I'll set up a factory, I'll buy these machinery and I'll set up a factory, they become ultra super rich. They became the industrialists. And people who couldn't catch on to that wave, they had, a period of few decades where it was very hard for them. Probably it was hard for them to even remain employed. So the question is that people who can transform themselves to this world quickly, they can become billionaires. I have very strong confidence that in next 20 years, India is going to produce at least 500 billionaires and at least, few hundred 10 billion worth companies. It was impossible 10 years back. Like in last 50 years, we have created probably only few hundred billionaires in India. Less than 100 if I remember correctly, right? But at the same time, people who do not keep up with it, it will be hard for them to even find employment. I can share something very interesting, and again, it does not just mean unemployment. 3-4 months back, we had a team of almost 20 people in our organization whose job was auditing all the lectures. Right? That every single online lecture which is recorded, is the teacher teaching properly there or not? Is there anything that needs to be given a feedback or not? Today, all of that is being done by AI. And there is only one person left in that team who just, when AI flags something, then he has to just go and review that once again. Now that does not mean that those 19 people do not have the job anymore. But they have to do something else, right? So fundamentally, then what are the things that will still remain relevant for Industry 4.0? Again, imagine if there's a factory which runs 24/7 on its own. The factory still needs people, but what would those people do? Right? And the answer to that is rooted in 3 key skills that humans are good at, and at least I believe that the machines cannot catch to that. One is critical thinking. Factory is built in a way. The machine will not ask, why is this factory built in this way? Why can't it be built in a different way? What could be an even better version of the factory? That critical thinking, you ask the why. You try to figure out what could be the better ways to do things. That is something at least I believe machines will not catch up on, at least next few decades to come. We don't know where the world will be 100 years down the line. Second is design thinking, right? Which is in a way, feedback loops. That if something is happening in a way, it is delivering the expected output. Machine's guidance is then keep doing it the same way, right? Machine can do it that, all right, this is the assembly line running, the car seam being fit. If one particular part does not fill, now machines are intelligent enough to figure out other part and make it work, right? But asking that, what is the performance metric for this whole assembly line? Is 100 cars being produced in a day sufficient? Or is just the car being produced is a good metric? Then the critical thinking and design thinking comes in that quality of the car is also important. AI will not ask you, why are you not bothered about quality? Why are you only bothered about the number of cars being produced, right? So critical thinking, design thinking, and lastly, there is, in the business problem solving or even in computer science, there's something called as decision tree making. At each step, being able to think that what all scenarios could exist and how those scenarios are going to be handled. And then again, that what is the most optimized path for the business process to operate in. I believe these are the 3 key skills that will still remain relevant in the Industry 4.0. So hence, for the students, and actually it's about lifelong learning today, not just the students, but for all of us as well. I think it's important, and not just important, but necessary and critical to make sure that we keep sharpening ourselves on these. That's all that I thought of sharing with you all today. If anyone have any questions, maybe in the next few minutes I can take few questions.
Can you please pass on the mic, KCP? Because sir is running short of time and he has to board flight, yes.
Hello. Sir, I'm Linish, Department of Commerce. Sir, my question is that Niti Aayog is planning to get India will become developed in 2047, India at 100. Sir, the R&D expenditure and R&D expenditure in innovation and infrastructure spending by the private and government, is this enough for to get India will become developed country in 2047, that is India at 100?
Yeah, I'll tell my view about it. So I spent some time in Bay Area long back, and I spent work for some time in Berlin, New York. Bay Area, of course, is a place which is kind of the cradle of innovation for at least last 4 or 5 decades. And if you think about what is the bottleneck to growth, often the normal first response that most people feel is that it's the money, it's the capital, or let's say how much money is government spending to build the infra, etc., etc. The truth is far from that. The bottleneck for innovation is hope. What most individuals strongly believe that would happen, and they then do it. See, the biggest innovation does not come from more capital. Like just few days back, we had this DeepSeek large language model released by China, which was trained for less than 1% cost that OpenAI spent to build an AI. Right? What got that? It's not that, pumping more money. See, we have raised 500 crores in investment. But I know that money cannot build the company. If building a company, building a nation was possible with money, why would anyone invest? Investors have all the money, they will build everything, right? Why do they need founders and entrepreneurs to build the organizations? Because founders come with irrational hope, irrational belief that great things will happen if I do them. So I think for India's growth as well, I think at its core, that's the most important thing. That are you irrationally optimistic? Are you irrationally, like people might say, this guy is just crazy. He just says this will happen, that will happen. And to some extent, even our leaders are just entrepreneurs. They are irrationally optimistic that great things will happen and will make them happen. If that translates to everyone, if that translates to, every citizen of the country, then it will definitely happen.
All right, thank you so much. Do we have time for one more question, sir? All right, can we please pass on the mic first? Yes.
Hi, Sunil here. Been in the entrepreneurship field for 25 years. I'm in the IT sector. So the design strategy and the design tree that you last mentioned, don't you think with the latest foundation models that are coming from OpenAI and now DeepSeek and Anthropic, everything just losing face, don't you think we should build a moat around this, at least this industry called manufacturing, or where the maximum people are going to get employed, especially in a scenario like India, where the government is trying to pump in money and Niti Aayog, etc., trying to do their bit. If we don't build a moat, don't you think we'll get wiped? Surely because of the last 3 things that you mentioned, which you think that humans have.
Yeah.
Within few days, humans may not have.
Right. No, see, to be candid, to some extent it is impossible to predict how this intelligence, and as people are working on super intelligence, might pan out. Right? On one side, what might emerge, it's impossible to predict. Right? One may argue that forget about matching the human intelligence, we might have machines which have super intelligence. And when we talk about super intelligence, we don't even know what it is, because we have never experienced it. Humans are the peak of intelligence as of today in the known universe. Right? And if there are machines which have super intelligence, we don't know what it would lead to. There's a concept called Kardashev scale. Some of you who are into astrophysics, etc., might have read about that. Kardashev scales basically talks about a civilization. It has 4 scales of civilization. If we develop, artificial super intelligence, most philosophers, modern philosophers, believe that we will jump 1 level on Kardashev scales. And another kind of construct there is that when a civilization is jumping Kardashev scale, either it gets wiped out or it becomes a super civilization. Which path it will go to, it's impossible to predict.
All right. With that, I hope we could conclude the Q&A session because yes, definitely he has to catch a flight, I assume. So may I humbly request Dr. Monu John to kindly come forward and express our deep admiration to Mr. Abhimanyu Saxena. Thank you so much for this enriching session and all the best wishes for the Scaler. May you inspire and evoke the dreams of many more.